If any wife has gone astray and broken faith with her husband, the husband shall bring his wife to the priest. Ish ki tiste ishto uma'ala vo ma'al. If a woman tiste goes astray, in the noun form, that woman is called a sota, the straying wife. So there was a ritual in the ancient world, at least according to our Torah portion, in which a husband who suspects that his wife has had an affair, but there are no witnesses to this affair, and a fit of jealousy overcomes him, he is to bring his wife to the priest. And as he brings his wife to the priest, he also brings an offering of 1/10 of an ephah of barley flour. And the priest takes the wife in front of the door of the tabernacle or the temple when it stood, and the priest would take water in an earthen vessel and some earth from the floor of the tabernacle and mix together this muddy potion, would bear the woman's head, place upon her hands the meal offering that the husband has brought, and then the priest would induce a spell and say to her, "If no man has lain with you, you will be immune to this water that is infused with the earth from the tabernacle. If guilty, when you drink it, your belly will distend and your thigh will sag." And then she had to drink this potion. What are we to do with this strange, archaic, and frankly humiliating ritual? Nothing. The first thing we need to understand is this is no longer in force, and our sages of old actually think that it was probably never, ever implemented. And what was the purpose of this crazy ritual? To deal with the jealousy of a husband, to humiliate the wife? And eventually, even though we don't think it was ever implemented, it was abolished. And why did the rabbis abolish it? The rabbis explain it like this. They said that society was getting worse and worse and worse, more adultery was being committed, and therefore the ritual didn't work anymore. This ritual that they didn't ever seem to implement. It's always been an incredibly puzzling ritual, the ritual of the sota. Sometimes I've tried to justify it by saying that if the husband was jealous, there needed to be some sort of ritual in order to repair the marriage, but to do so in a way that humiliates his wife is a little extreme. And then there are two more parts of this Torah portion, and it took me until this week, and Rabbi Josh Fagelson helped me to see how these disparate parts of the Torah portion fit together to help us perhaps understand this ritual at the beginning. So what happens after we read about the sota? Well, then there's a section about the Nazirite that I spoke about earlier, about this person who takes a vow to be holy to God. And then finally the Torah portion concludes with some very famous lines, the priestly benediction. May the eternal God bless you and keep you, these words that we know well. So what can we see from this arc of the stories? Rashi, the great medieval commentator, teaches that one who witnessed the sota ritual would be shocked by its violence, and they would feel a need to withdraw from society, which is the reason that right after we read about the sota, we read about the Nazirite. Because this is something that one might feel they needed to do, is how crazy to live in a society in which there's so much jealousy of a husband towards his wife, and then this ritual that needs to be done. I've been thinking about that this week, our desire, or perhaps our need to withdraw from society when we see violence around us. When we've been listening over the last few weeks about the violence that took the lives of small children in Uvalde, Texas, reading these terrible things that doctors have been writing about what they have seen when these children came into the hospital. And then, if that weren't enough that we had to deal with the death of small children in a violent way, this last week we've also have to be reminded again of the January 6th uprising and the terrible things that happened on that day. And if that weren't enough, an armed man threatened the life of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh at his home. It doesn't matter what we think about the justice and his politics, but to think that a Supreme Court justice has to be worried for his life is just awful. So much violence, so much fear. How are we supposed to handle all of this that comes up? So Rashi argues that we need to withdraw for a while. Perhaps we need to be like the Nazarite. Perhaps we need, as I learned when I was in Israel and the news would get very intense, people would take what they called a dieta, a news diet, in which they wouldn't listen to the news for a while because it was too upsetting and too difficult. Because when we see these shocking images, and now it's not just reading text or even pictures, but so much video that we have to watch, that we need to take a break from that, not to look at it, which of course is extremely difficult now that we have these devices that are always in our hands and always making noise and always calling attention to ourselves. And on top of that, though, our Torah portion gives us another way, not just to separate out from the bad news that we can't absorb, but the priestly benediction. So how has the priestly benediction become a corrective to the Sota, to the Nazarite? The priestly benediction is a threefold blessing. May the eternal God bless you and keep you. And then we say, may the light of God's countenance shine down upon us, and may we feel God's grace. May God watch over us, and may God lead us to peace. The rabbis understood this blessing was a blessing that we should have the material needs that we need, Yevarechacha, that we should be blessed. V'yishmerecha, but may God bless you and keep you. May we also be safe. May God's presence be shining into our lives, and may we feel grace. May we feel security, and ultimately the final line, that we should feel peace. Things that are often hard to feel in these trying days. In the Torah portion, we learn that the priests are supposed to bless us with these words. But the priests aren't blessing us. They're just being conduits for God's blessing. As we'd say, they are klei kodesh, instruments of holiness. That through them, the people would feel the presence of God and feel that safety and security and peace that we all so desperately need. In our community, when we do the priestly benediction, we don't usually do it with the priest's blessing in front of the congregation. Instead, we, especially on Saturday mornings, come together for a group hug. We take our talitot, we put them around each other, and we bless each other. This is a custom that was started here by Cantor Jeff Klepper, as I understand it, but then later learned when Rabbi David Ellenson came in for my installation in 2010, that the early Reform prayer books made the suggestion that the priestly benediction doesn't come from on high, but that it comes from each other, that we bless each other. And when Rabbi Ellenson came here and came to our Shabbat morning service, he said, I remember those old prayer books that talked about it, but I've actually never been to a place that did it like this. And it is so beautiful for us to stand up together, put our arms, our talitot around each other, and offer words of blessing. Because each and every one of us can be a vehicle or a vessel for blessing. And I think we can learn from this that we all need to be conduits of blessing, that our responsibility in the world is to bring blessings, to bring the blessings of safety, of security, of peace, and of comfort, but also that we need to be recipients of those blessings as well. And sometimes when we come to synagogue and sometimes when we're with other people, we can be the people who give. But sometimes we need to be the people who can receive. But that reciprocal blessing is so powerful, a way in which we can support each other when it's really hard for us to feel that support, when we are scared and frightened and angry about the things in our world. That we can be supported and we can support each other, or perhaps because we are together, we don't feel so afraid. So we sometimes need to retreat for a time like the Nazarite, and we also need to take turns being the one who can offer the blessings of peace and wholeness, and being the ones who can receive it as well. So thank God we don't do the Sota ritual anymore, but that we continue to be vessels of holiness, to offer blessings to each other, and to be recipients of blessings in a world in which there is violence and pain, in a world in which we see such terrible images. We need more than ever to be those vehicles for blessing to each other and to our world. Amen.